My name is Quinn Parker. I'm 19 years old. Since I was 9, I've lived with my Aunt Rosa and Uncle Marcus. My parents died in a crash on a rainy December night. They never came home from their anniversary dinner. I still remember the phone ringing at 11:07 p.m. A neighbor found them on the highway. A drunk driver had crossed the center line. I woke up to social workers and whipped blankets. I clutched my mom's heart-shaped pendant. By morning, I was an orphan. Aunt Rosa arrived first. She wore my mother's favorite rose brooch. "You're safe now, sweetheart," she said, scooping me into her arms. Uncle Marcus appeared behind her, silent but steady. They felt like heroes. They gave me Sam's old bedroom. My older cousin was away at summer camp. The room still smelled like vanilla cake from Agnes's bakery. Uncle Marcus built a new desk and bookshelf. Aunt Rosa bought me a pink lamp that looked just like the one at my old house. It was perfect. In the first months, they spoke of Mom and Dad often. "Your dad loved comic books too," Marcus told me once. "He'd have laughed at your Spider-Man costume." Aunt Rosa showed me their wedding photos. Each Sunday, we drove to Willow Grove Cemetery. I left fresh tulips on their stones. It felt right. It felt like home. By the time I turned 11, those conversations faded. I asked about my college fund and got a gentle dodge. Rosa smiled too quickly. Marcus cleared his throat. "We'll talk about it later," she said. I felt the warmth slip away. That same year, I overheard them talking in the bakery loft. They ran Sweet Glen Bakery from the storefront behind their house. They made exceptional pastries. Marcus handled the ovens. Rosa designed the window displays. The shop thrived. One night, I crept up the stairs and heard Marcus whisper, "We could use that money to expand new ovens, more staff." Rosa replied, "The trust is for Quinn's tuition." Her voice shook. When I asked for confirmation the next morning, they offered excuses. "Education is expensive," Rosa said. "We're investing wisely." I believed them. I wanted to believe them. I spent my teen years learning the bakery trade. I kneaded dough at dawn. I mixed glazes after school. I wrapped cakes on weekends. I answered phones and tallied receipts. Instead of an allowance, I earned points toward extra helpings of Aunt Rosa's cinnamon rolls. At 15, I asked to see the fund details. Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. Quinn Parker Education Trust Balance, $128, $540 2017. Projected growth, 6% yearly. By 18, he said, pointing, "This will cover 4 years at a good university." I nodded and smiled. That number became my North Star. I worked harder in school. I saw each shifted tray and each invoice as bricks toward my future. I joined the debate team, the biology club, and volunteered at the animal shelter. I kept a 4.0 GPA. I skipped parties to sleep early and rise for dough proofing. My friends drifted. I had a goal: freedom. When my acceptance letter from the University of Chicago arrived, I cried. I got a partial scholarship. I called Rosa and Marcus together. I barely heard their congratulations. They weighed the remaining cost in hushed tones. Chicago's pricey, Marcus warned. Rosa patted my hand. "We'll make it work." As move-in day approached, I sensed a shift. Rosa forgot to help me shop for dorm bedding. I texted her 3 times. She never replied. Marcus mentioned staff shortages at the bakery. "We'll miss your help," he said, trying to sound casual. My cousin Sam, now 17, carefree and oblivious, still seemed happy for me. He asked for a souvenir sweatshirt. "Make me jealous," he joked. I forced a laugh. 2 days before departure, I reminded them about the trust transfer. Over dinner, Marcus said, "Let's sort paperwork this weekend." Rosa agreed, but her eyes darted away. That weekend passed in silence. The night before I left, we shared Rosa's pot roast and steamed green beans. We talked of weather and subway safety. No one mentioned money. I went to bed with my suitcase on the floor, dreaming of lecture halls and new friends. I woke at 6 a.m. on the move-in day. The sky was clear and crisp. I double-checked my packing list. The drive to campus would take nearly 3 hours. At breakfast, Rosa handed me a thermos of coffee and a box of pastries. Marcus loaded my bags into the SUV without a word. My friend Lena dropped by to say goodbye. We hugged so hard I thought I might cry. She promised to send photos. I smiled through tears. As Lena's car pulled away, I caught Rosa watching us from the kitchen window. Her lips pinched together until I blinked. Then she turned away. I felt a chill. The drive was quiet. Marcus stared at the road. Rosa scrolled her phone. At 9:30 a.m., we turned into the lot of First Community Bank. Marcus said, "We'll handle tuition and housing fees here first." I nodded. My heart raced. I opened the door and walked inside. Rosa and Marcus stayed in the car. I approached the teller's window with trembling hands. I set down my ID and bank card. "Good morning," I said, voice small. "I'd like to withdraw funds for my first semester." The teller typed. She frowned at the screen. "I'm sorry," she said. "Your access has been restricted." "Restricted," I echoed. My chest tightened. She sighed. "Your account was put on hold yesterday." I stumbled back. Outside, I heard Rosa's muffled gasp. I rushed out, blinking against the bright light. Rosa and Marcus stepped from the SUV. "They froze it without telling me," I shouted. Rosa's face went pale. Marcus's jaw clenched. "We discussed this," he said. His voice was low and cold. The funds needed to stay here a while longer. I stared at them, at the pastry-scented air, at the bank building looming behind me. I felt my future slip through my fingers. In that moment, I remembered the ledger on Marcus's laptop. I remembered the talk of expansion. I remembered the empty promises. My hands shook, but beneath the fear a spark ignited. I would not let them steal my future. I squared my shoulders. "Then I'll handle it myself," I said. Rosa opened her mouth. Marcus took a step forward, but I was already turning away. As I marched toward the campus shuttle stop, suitcase wheels clattering on concrete, I felt something else: excitement. A plan was forming, and move-in day became the day everything changed. At 5:45 a.m., my alarm jarred me awake, and I lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar hum of campus silence. I slid out of bed, palms cold on the sheet, and tiptoed to the desk. My laptop flickered to life on the first try, an encouraging sign after a night of restless planning. I opened the bakery portal and re-entered my credentials, heart-hammering as the dashboard loaded. The joint Sweet Glen Bakery and Cafe operating account sat before me, balance clearly visible under business checking, $385,219.07. My breath caught when I realized that figure still dwarfed what I needed. I closed my eyes and pictured the ledger entries I'd annotated, the education reserve transfers that had dwindled to nothing. This was my chance to recover precisely $128, $542.17, no penny more. I drafted an email to Aunt Rosa and Uncle Marcus in a blank document rather than in my actual mail client, rehearsing the tone: professional, factual, unemotional. Subject: recovery of misappropriated education, trust funds. Dear Rosa and Marcus, I am writing to inform you that as an authorized user on our joint business account, and in accordance with the provisions of my parents' will, I will today recover the full amount of funds designated for my post-secondary education, $128,542.17, which were misallocated to personal and business expenses. Attached, please find documentary evidence from the bakery's accounting records and the trust language. The recovery transaction will occur at First Community Bank at 8:00 a.m. I trust you will understand this action is necessary to uphold my parents' intentions. I printed that text to a PDF file on my phone so I could copy and paste it later. I switched to the business portal and hovered over the transfer funds option. My hands shook as the clock on my laptop clicked towards 7:55 a.m. I opened a fresh browser tab and logged into my new personal checking account at Ridgeview Bank, the one with the student-friendly terms I'd opened in secret. My fingers typed the exact amount, double-checking decimals 128,54, 2.17. I wrote recovery of education trust funds in the memo field and practiced a steadying breath. At 7:59 a.m. GPT, campus notifications pinged with a weather alert, clear skies, and 62 degrees, and then at 8:00 a.m. on the dot, I clicked Submit Transfer. The screen blinked, processing, and I fought the urge to click away. 7 seconds later, it refreshed to transfer complete, confirmation number TRX 024671. My chest tightened as I captured a screenshot with date and time clearly displayed, August 8th, 2025, 8:00 a.m. I snapped back to my email draft tab and pasted the notice to Marcus and Rosa, attached the PDF of my rehearsed letter, and attached screenshots from the portal. I hit send. My finger hovered over send to Bank Fraud Department in a second draft before I changed my mind. No, I could wait a few minutes. First, I needed to inform their major suppliers so the business relationships remained intact. At 8:05 a.m., I opened my contacts list and messaged Marco Diaz at Artisan Wood Suppliers. Marco, this is Quinn Parker from Sweet Glen. I want to let you know there's a trust dispute affecting our joint account and that I've recovered funds owed to me. This shouldn't jeopardize our orders, but you may see a temporary hold on payments. I apologize for any inconvenience and will keep you updated. I pressed send. A minute later, I sent similar notes to the leather upholstery partner and local delivery service. I paused, hands trembling, and realized I had forgotten to alert campus security. I sent a quick text to Officer Ramsey through the university's emergency app. Financial dispute with family might spill over to campus this afternoon. Please have someone nearby. Thank you. I closed the app and exhaled. By 8:15 a.m., the first ring came Uncle Marcus on my mobile. I let it go to voicemail. His message crackled Quinn. What have you done? Reverse that transfer now or I'll call the police. You can't just steal from us. I dialed his number back. When he answered, I spoke calmly. I didn't steal. I recovered funds misappropriated from the education trust that my parents set aside. I'm prepared to discuss this legally, but I won't reverse the transfer. He shouted something about betrayal and hung up. Next came Aunt Rosa. Her voice trembled with tears and fury. How could you do this to us? To your family, I repeated. I took exactly what my parents intended for my education. We can resolve this through a legal settlement or trust mediation. She clung to family ties and begged me to reconsider, but I held firm until she sobbed and hung up. I sank onto my bed, adrenaline draining, and dialed the student legal aid office. A law student named Marcus, whom I'd met in class, answered. He listened as I summarized the morning's actions and read aloud the trust provisions. You're in a strong position, he said. Your authorized user status and the will language back you. The transfer itself might raise questions, but you documented everything thoroughly. Follow up with a formal demand letter through certified mail and consider a contingency attorney if they contest. I thanked him and ended the call. My phone buzzed again, an email from First Community Bank's fraud department. We are reviewing the disputed transfer of $128,542.17 from account ending in 4321. The account has been placed on temporary hold pending resolution. Please provide any documentation you have regarding your authority to make this transaction. I opened my documents folder and attached my parents' will transcript, the annotated screenshots, and a copy of the trust deed. I hit send and felt a flicker of relief. At 9:00 a.m., I logged into Canvas for my business ethics seminar. My professor, Dr. Hayashi, greeted me with a raised eyebrow. You look chipper, she said. I forced a small smile. All good, I lied. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text from Lena that simply read, thinking of you. I typed back, thank you. The rest of class passed in a blur of Kantian duty and corporate governance. My mind raced ahead to the legal letters I'd draft later. As we filed out, my TA Marcus caught up to me. He whispered, hypothetical question, could a beneficiary use trustee's own account access to recover misused funds? I met his gaze. Hypothetically, I said only if they document authority and show clear misappropriation. He nodded and walked on. At noon, I went to the library and called my grandmother, Grandma May, on speaker. I laid out every detail my parents' crash, the trust that transfers this morning's recovery. Her voice cracked. I always wondered what happened to that money, she said. Your parents saved for you. I'll back you any way I can. She promised to reach out to family members and ask for my side. I felt warmth spread through my chest. By mid-afternoon, voicemails had piled Marcus's heavy breathing and threats, Rosa's sobs and pleas distant relatives demanding explanations. I let them go to voicemail. On impulse, I texted Cousin Sam. Check your email. Moments later, he replied. What did you do? I answered. I recovered my education fund. I have proof you can see if you want. Evening found me exhausted and wired. My roommate's laughter drifted through the thin walls. I stared at the glow of my phone, a new email from the bakery's corporate lawyer demanding immediate return of the funds and threatening litigation. I forwarded it to Student Legal Aid and emailed the attorney Marcus recommended. As I closed my laptop at 10 p.m., I stared at the ceiling and realized that for the first time, my future felt secure. My parents' money was mine again. My education was safe. Tomorrow would bring more conflict, maybe police involvement or court hearings. But tonight, I had taken back what belonged to me. I whispered into the darkness, "This is for Mom and Dad," and drifted into a sleep edged with both dread and triumph. When the sun rose the next morning, I sat at my desk in the dorm room, my first real desk, watching dust motes drift in a slant of light. My phone was already buzzing with missed calls and text. Aunt Rosa demanding I reverse the transfer before you destroy us, Uncle Marcus threatening police action, and Lena asking me to lunch so I'd eat something. I silenced the alerts and opened my email where the bakery's corporate lawyer had replied to my forwarded demand letter with a curt refusal and a warning of litigation. My stomach twisted as I read his words. He claimed trustees had broad discretion and accused me of unauthorized interference in business affairs. I closed the laptop and took a steadying breath. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a legal battle, and I needed counsel beyond campus legal aid. After class, I walked across the quad to the student center and met with Marissa Thornton, the contingency attorney who had agreed to take my case. She examined my documents, my parents' will excerpt, account statements, annotated screenshots, and nodded gravely. "You have a compelling case for breach of fiduciary duty," she said, tapping her pen against the table. "Your authorized user status complicates things, but your documentation is airtight. I recommend we file a motion for declaratory judgment to affirm your right to those funds and simultaneously prepare for counter-litigation in case they accuse you of conversion." I listened heart-pounding, but grounded by her calm confidence. By early afternoon, we had drafted pleadings and prepared a summons. Back in the dorm, I scraped together change for the campus cafe's tuna salad wrap and forced down each bite while scrolling through supplier emails. Marco Diaz at Artisan Edgewood had written, "We received your note. We'll release the hold on payments once the bank clears this dispute, but please keep us informed." Relief warmed me as I replied, promising transparency and stability. I then messaged the leather upholstery contact and the logistics partner, customizing each note to reassure them our relationship would endure. My fingers stung from typing, but each sent message was a brick in rebuilding professional trust. That evening, I attended my economics seminar on contract law. Dr. Patel lectured on remedies for breach of contract-specific performance restitution injunctions, and my pen flew across the margin, "Restitution is recovery of misallocated trust funds." I glanced at Marcus, my TA, who gave me a furtive thumbs up. After class, he approached me in the hallway. Hypothetically, he said quietly, if a beneficiary recovers misused trust assets and the trustee sues for conversion, the beneficiary can assert an affirmative defense of unjust enrichment. I exhaled. "That's exactly what we need," I whispered back. When I returned to my room, I found Sam waiting by my door, looking pale and nervous. He held 2 steaming cups of coffee from the campus shop. "I figured you needed a friend," he said, handing me one. I thanked him and took a cautious sip. His presence was both comfort and complication. He'd sided with Rosa and Marcus at first, but now the betrayal we shared bound us together. He admitted quietly, "I didn't know until this morning how badly they'd misused the money. I'm sorry." His apology knotted something in my chest. I nodded, grateful for his empathy. We talked for nearly an hour about childhood memories, the smell of fresh dough at Dawn Mom's laugh in the kitchen, and I realized how much I needed that connection. Later, unable to study, I wandered across campus until I found Grandma May sitting on a stone bench under an oak tree. She wore a soft cardigan and held a thermos of tea. "I came as soon as I could," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and old letters. We sat together in silence, the leaves rustling overhead. Then she slid a manila envelope across the bench. Inside were faded photographs of my parents, my father's crooked grin, my mother's hand resting on his shoulder, and a stack of unread letters they had written to one another before I was born. I lifted them, my hands trembling, and read passages about dreams for my future, hopes for my education, and promises that I would always be protected. Tears rolled down my cheeks. They planned every detail, Grandma said softly. You have to fight to honor their wishes. I clutched the letters to my chest and nodded. This was why I risked everything. That night, back in my room, I drafted emails to extended family members, uncles, aunts, cousins, explaining my actions, sharing evidence, and asking for their support. Some responded with anger, but several, Uncle Paul, Aunt Diane, Cousin Brooke, thanked me for speaking up and promised to advocate on my behalf. The tide of family opinion was shifting. I printed copies of the plaintiff's motion and the trust deed and pinned them to my bulletin board, my first war map. The next morning, I arrived at Marissa's office for a strategy session before filing. She outlined a timeline: file our complaint by week's end, serve it on Rosa and Marcus, then attend a mandatory mediation session in 30 days. She warned me that they might attempt to subpoena my campus records or accuse me of emotional distress, causing mental impairment. We prepared affidavits from professors attesting to my competence and from TA Marcus confirming my precise use of accounting software. We also secured a statement from Jade at the residence hall confirming my early morning emails to campus security. Armed with legal armor, I walked to my marketing class, feeling both burdened and empowered. Professor Jin asked me to present my group's ad campaign, and I spoke clearly, drawing on negotiation tactics I'd learned in my own fight, emphasizing value propositions, addressing objections, and leaving room for genuine resolution. When I sat down, my classmates applauded, and I realized my ordeal had sharpened my communication skills in ways no textbook could. After class, I stopped by the bursar's office. The clerk recognized me from my move-in paperwork and asked if I'd decided about deferring. I handed her a letter from Marissa stating that a legal dispute was pending and that I had arranged emergency funding through a university gap program. She nodded sympathetically, waved a stabilizing hand over her side of the counter, and said, "We'll proceed with your enrollment. Good luck." I exhaled relief washing through me. My place at the university was safe for now. That evening, I walked it to the meditation garden behind the library, clutching my leather-bound journal. I wrote out the events of the week: the transfer, the calls, the supplier emails, the meeting with Marissa Grandma's letters, Sam's coffee run, and I realized they formed a tapestry of pain, betrayal, resilience, and newfound strength. I wrote until the fountain's gentle splashes blended with my pen strokes. When I finished, I closed the journal and sat in silence, the night air cool on my skin, feeling for the first time in days a glimmer of peace. As I made my way back to the dorm, my phone buzzed with a calendar invite from Marissa Mediation Conference Room 2B, August 22nd at 0 a.m. I tapped accept. The date glowed on my screen. I inhaled and remembered Grandma's words. Fight for them, fight for yourself. With each step toward my door, I felt more certain that I would stand firm at that table, armed with proof, backed by family, supported by mentors, and I would not leave until my parents' intentions were honored. I unlocked my door and found Lena waiting with a slice of chocolate cake on a paper plate. She grinned and said, "You look like you could use sugar." I laughed, took the plate, and together we sat on my bed, savoring each bite. She asked how I was truly, and I told her the barest outlines. Legal motion filed, mediation, set supplies, and family reaching out. She pressed my hand and said she was proud. In that simple affirmation, I felt the weight shift. Later, as I lay in bed, I realized part 3 of my journey was ending not with a flourish of victory, but with the quiet resolve to meet whatever came next. I closed my eyes, replaying the week's milestones in my mind. The courtroom documents, the oak tree confessions, the supplier emails, the classroom successes, the healing letters. And I knew that when mediation dawned, I would sit at that table no longer a scared kid begging for tuition, but a 19-year-old woman claiming her right to the future her parents had dreamed for her. The morning of mediation dawned cool and bright, and I sat in the University Legal Clinic's small conference room, tapping my shoe against the linoleum floor until Marissa arrived with the files in her hand and her calm confidence in her stride. Across the table, I could see Aunt Rosa's red-rimmed eyes and Uncle Marcus's clenched jaw. their lawyer perched beside them like a coiled spring. As we settled in, the mediator, a retired judge with gentle gray eyes, asked us to introduce ourselves and state our purpose. When it was my turn, I spoke clearly. I'm Quinn Parker, the beneficiary of the Parker Family Education Trust, here to resolve the misappropriation of funds my parents set aside for my schooling. I met Rosa's gaze for a moment, and I saw a flicker of regret before her lips pressed into a thin line. Marcus shifted as the mediator explained needs, the process, opening statements, joint discussion, then private caucuses if needed. Marissa's opening was precise, laying out the trust provisions, the timeline of transfers buried in bakery ledgers, and the legal authority that allowed me to recover exactly $128.542. Their lawyer countered with boilerplate about discretionary power and business necessity, but his voice lacked conviction under Marissa's clear evidence. When he tried to argue that reinvesting in the bakery had ultimately preserved the business and thus indirectly benefited me, Marissa pivoted smoothly, pointing out that a trustee's duty is to act exclusively for the beneficiary's purposes, first not their own ambitions. In that moment, I felt the weight of every late-night ledger review, every betrayal and sleepless hour crystallize into purpose. This wasn't just about money. It was about honoring my parents' intentions. As the joint discussion unfolded, the mediator asked what outcomes each side sought. I spoke without rancor. I want a formal acknowledgement that the recovered funds satisfy my parents' trust, and I ask for a commitment that my educational expenses be paid directly from a segregated account going forward. Rosa's voice trembled as she responded. We're willing to acknowledge the disbursement, but we would like some oversight on future expenditures to ensure the funds aren't misused again. At that, Marcus's lawyer sighed, and Marissa leaned forward gently but firmly. My client is of legal age and will manage her own funds. Any oversight would violate her autonomy and the very purpose of the trust. You may propose a way to document expenditures in good faith, but you cannot have veto power. A hush fell over the table, while Rosa's tears glistened in the overhead light. The mediator interjected, perhaps we can agree to regular reporting rather than oversight, a transparent ledger that Quinn reviews and both parties sign off on without giving control to either side. Relief rippled through me. This compromise honored my independence while offering the family transparency, and it recognized the trust's intent. After a brief caucus, Rosa and Marcus returned and accepted the mediator's proposal with bowed heads. We drafted a written settlement, a statement acknowledging the breach and the recovery, an agreement to create a separate Parker Education Trust account at Ridgeview Bank with Quinn as sole signatory, and Rosa and Marcus as secondary and quarterly statements delivered to all three of us. We signed the papers that would close this chapter of betrayal and open a new one of accountability. And I felt a fragile warmth bloom in my chest. Rosa reached across the table with trembling hands and said, I'm sorry, Quinn, we never should have done this. Marcus stood and offered a stiff nod, avoiding my gaze. I accepted Rosa's apology with a quiet, thank you, knowing full well that trust once broken takes years to rebuild. Outside the clinic, Sam was waiting with 2 cups of tea, his quiet presence a balm after the emotional firestorm. He'd come early, slipping in just as mediation ended, and he guided me into a hug that spoke louder than any words. Walking back to campus, I held the settlement agreement in my hand, like a sacred text, each clause a testament to my parents' values and to my own resolve. That evening, I drafted a post for my private journal. No audience but myself, laying out every lesson learned, the importance of diligence, the power of evidence, the necessity of standing up for what's right, even when the cost is personal. Lena joined me later with a slice of carrot cake, and we laughed over the absurdity of family betrayal and the sweetness of my small victory. In the days that followed, I opened the new trust account and transferred the recovered funds into segregated categories: tuition, housing, books, emergency. Each labeled envelope felt like a promise kept. Professors commented on my renewed focus in class, and my TA Marcus offered a quiet congratulations, reminding me that law and ethics aren't just theories, they are tools for justice. Grandma May sent me a letter with more of my parents' early wedding photos and a note. You honored their wishes beautifully, my darling. I placed her letter on my desk next to the photos from that oak tree bench, their smiles frozen in time, and now mirrored in my own determination. Though the strain on my relationship with Rosa and Marcus lingered, there were no family dinners or casual check-ins like before. The settlement gave us a framework to interact with honesty and respect. I forgave them, slowly understanding that regret must be earned, not demanded. My coursework in business ethics and contract law took on new meaning as I saw each case study through the lens of my experience. I began volunteering with the university's Financial Counseling Center, offering guidance to freshmen navigating scholarships and budgets, hoping to spare others the pain of betrayal I had faced. In late September, I co-led a student panel on trust management, and when I spoke about my journey, my voice was steady, my eyes clear. I realized I had transformed the darkest moment of my life into a source of growth, and that my parents' final gift, their unwavering belief in my education, had guided me every step of the way. And so, as autumn painted the campus in gold and crimson, I walked to class with confidence that extended beyond grades or accolades. I carried the strength of someone who had fought for their future and won it back, and I knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, I would always honor both my parents' legacy and my own capacity for justice. After the mediation, my days settled into a new rhythm that felt both strange and liberating. I walked across campus each morning with a lightness in my step, knowing that the funds my parents had saved were at last secure for my education. And yet, my heart bore the quiet imprint of the struggle we had endured. I spent early afternoons in the Financial Counseling Center, where freshmen hovered nervously over spreadsheets and scholarship applications. When a sophomore arrived in tears because her Pell Grant had been delayed, I guided her through the online portal and helped her draft a letter to the bursar. And in her relief, I heard echoes of my own desperation. So I offered gentle words and practical advice until her shoulders relaxed. In the evenings, I continued working at the campus bookstore, scanning textbooks and shelving new arrivals. But now I viewed each receipt as another opportunity to budget wisely, just as my parents intended. One Saturday, I led a small workshop in the student union for students orphaned or estranged. About 8 of us gathered with half-eaten donuts and mismatched chairs, and I shared my story step by step, then handed out templates for trust inquiries and legal aid contacts. When a young man with hollow eyes thanked me for giving him direction, I felt the embers of purpose flare in my chest. I also found time to walk the tree-lined paths by the river that wound behind the dorms. The campus map called it Willow Grove Trail, but I imagined myself retracing my parents' footsteps, listening to wind whisper through bare branches, reminding me that roots run deeper than money, and that healing grows slowly like wild grasses. One afternoon, Grandma May surprised me at the bookstore with a basket of homemade bread and a letter from my late mother addressed to me on my 21st birthday. In her neat cursive, she had written about the river people's promise to honor each child's journey and to trust them to carry their own dreams. And as I broke the bread's crust and read those words, tears coursed down my cheeks for joys both lost and found. In late September, I received an unexpected email from the private firm that had managed my parents' life insurance trust before my aunt and uncle took over. An executive apologized for failing to contact me after probate and offered a pro bono review of any other family trust documents. I arranged a meeting and learned they held records of a small educational stipend my grandfather had left in '92, which they promptly transferred to my education account. Another quiet gift from ancestors I had never known. Meanwhile, Aunt Rosa reached out via text one evening. "Coffee, I owe you a proper apology." I hesitated, recalling the years of betrayal, but I agreed and met her at a campus cafe the next day. She arrived in a soft sweater and offered a tentative smile. For the first time in years, we spoke without lawyers or mediators. She said she had joined a trustee education seminar, learned about fiduciary duty, and realized how blinded she'd been by fear and ambition. I listened and asked questions about her regrets, and she answered honestly, voice low, tears in her eyes. I felt a fragile peace as I told her I forgave her not for her sake, but to free my own heart. She reached across the table and held my hand. And in that moment, I recognized how much both of us had grown. Cousin Sam drew closer too. He joined the Financial Counseling Center as a volunteer, and together we developed a peer mentorship program for students from difficult family backgrounds. We pitched our proposal to the student government, offering microgrants from my scholarship fund and training sessions on budgeting leases and trusting one's own decisions. When the Senate approved our program, I felt the quiet thrill of turning pain into service. Professors took notice of my transformation. Dr. Hayashi invited me to co-author a case study on trust law for her legal ethics journal, and I relished the chance to combine personal experience with academic research, dissecting real statutes alongside statutes of my heart. Late nights were still restless, old anxieties surfaced when I opened my bank app and saw the balance drop after tuition payments. But I reminded myself of every ledger entry I'd scrutinized, every signature I'd secured, and I found confidence in my own vigilance. Seasons shifted to gold as autumn deepened. I joined a group hike to the nearby state park, and under a canopy of leaves, I shared stories of my parents with other hikers, weaving their laughter and dreams into the landscape. I realized that reclaiming my future had not only honored their legacy, but had woven me more tightly into a new community of allies and friends. As classes moved toward midterms, I studied contract disputes and trust administration with more engagement than ever. Each lecture felt personal, each case more vivid. Late one night in the stacks, I uncovered a dusty law review article on minor beneficiaries' rights, and I felt a thrill at how clearly it applied to my own journey. At the semester's end, I accepted an internship offer from a boutique estate planning firm downtown, where I would assist attorneys drafting wills and trust documents. When I told Rosa and Grandma May over video call, their pride warmed me like sunshine. Back on campus, I sat on a bench beside the quad reviewing my calendar filled with counseling shifts, internship prep panel sessions, and scholarship fund reports, and I realized that my parents' money had done more than pay tuition. It had empowered me to change others' lives. I opened my laptop, drafted a post for my private journal, and wrote, "I reclaimed more than money. I reclaimed my voice, my trust in myself, and my promise to others who feel powerless." Then I closed the lid, stood, and walked toward the science building with steady steps, knowing that though I could not control every upheaval ahead, I would face each challenge armed with evidence, compassion, and the strength that comes from honoring both ancestors' intentions and my own worth. By late December, the last week of finals dawned crisp and clear, and I realized I had crossed a threshold. I never imagined I was no longer the frightened orphan scrambling for tuition, but a 19-year-old woman standing in her parents' legacy, rooted and growing stronger every day. The morning after my last exam, I walked through the quad beneath bare oak limbs, dusted with frost, carrying a to-go coffee, and the settlement agreement folded in my pocket as a talisman. I met Sam at our favorite bench by the fountain, its bronze fish frozen in winter's embrace, and we laughed over the absurdity of our journey. Cousins turned co-mentors, two scattered children who had reclaimed their family's name and transformed betrayal into service. He told me how the peer mentorship program had awarded its first microgrant to a freshman whose single mother had died and whose financial aid was delayed. And I felt a thrill that my parents' money was guiding others toward hope. After that, I slipped into my internship at Clearwater Estate Planning, where I drafted trust amendments and observed attorneys negotiate guardian provisions for minors. Each clause I typed felt like a brushstroke on a canvas of compassion, and I remembered every ledger code I had circled in red as evidence of malfeasance. One afternoon, the senior partner invited me to contribute to a seminar on ethical trust management. I spoke about my own case study, the perils of blurred trustee boundaries, and the imperative of transparency. The room fell silent and then broke into genuine applause, confirming that my story had become a lesson not just for me, but for professionals poised to protect the vulnerable. In January, back on campus after winter break, I enrolled in a new elective on Indigenous perspectives in finance, taught by a visiting scholar of Cherokee descent, whose opening lecture described money as a tool that must serve community and future generations. As she spoke of holding wealth as you would a river, ensuring its flow for those downstream, I felt a deep resonance, as if my parents' careful planning and my own struggle had echoed this ancient wisdom. I raised my hand to ask how modern trust law might integrate communal stewardship, and she smiled, inviting dialogue that bridged ancestral knowledge and contemporary practice. That evening, I walked the Willow Grove Trail under star-laced skies, recalling Grandma May's stories of river people promises and the quiet strength of water carving stone over time. I thought of the path I'd forged not straight as an arrow, but winding like the river marked by obstacles and triumphs alike. And I whispered gratitude for the ancestors whose letters and life insurance had become threads weaving my journey. Academically, I thrived. Case briefs in business ethics came alive with personal insight. My professor of contract law encouraged me to submit an article to the student journal on beneficiary rights and trustee accountability, which I did, earning a byline that sat next to scholarly essays on corporate governance. Socially, I found balance weekends with Lena, exploring local cafes evenings with Mara, practicing pottery in the art studio study break hikes with new friends who knew only fragments of my backstory, but accepted me fully. I no longer felt isolated by trauma, but connected by honesty and vulnerability. My relationship with Aunt Rosa and Uncle Marcus evolved tentatively. They sent holiday cards with handwritten notes acknowledging my maturity and expressing hopes for reconciliation. I replied with warmth, tempered by boundaries, inviting them to family therapy sessions if they wished, but making clear I would not suffer breaches of trust again. They declined, yet over time I spotted Rosa in the quad, offering a shy wave, and Marcus sometimes lingered at the bookstore, avoiding eye contact, but nodding when our paths crossed. These small gestures felt like tentative new shoots pushing through winter ground. In March, the student government recognized our mentorship program with a leadership award, and I accepted it on a stage before peers and faculty, dedicating it to every student who had felt powerless. My speech echoed Grandpa Parker's promise that education opens doors no force can lock, and I saw in the audience faces lit by hope. That night, I celebrated quietly with Sam and Lena, toasting soda with the sparkle of college lights reflected in our glasses. And I knew I had found family again, forged not by blood alone, but by shared purpose. As spring unfurled its green promise, I sat in the library on a rainy afternoon, drafting my capstone project, a proposal for campus policy requiring trustees of student-managed funds to attend ethics workshops and submit semi-annual reports to beneficiaries, an idea born from my own ordeal and shaped by that Cherokee lecture on flowing wealth. I realized this project could help hundreds of students avoid the uncertainty I had faced. A final email pinged across my screen from my grandparents' former trust administrators, informing me they had located additional correspondence, confirming a small corpus from my great-grandfather's estate, now transferred to my account. I exhaled, recognizing that this quiet inheritance was both boon and symbol. The past held resources to nourish the future, if only one asked. I closed my laptop, rose from my chair, and stepped into the corridor, bright with afternoon sun and the hum of campus life. For the first time, I felt the horizon lie fully before me, unshadowed by fear, illuminated by the knowledge that I had honored my parents' vision, reclaimed my autonomy, and woven a tapestry of service from threads of adversity. My parents believed in the power of education to transform families and communities. I closed the legacy loop by carrying that gift forward, one student, one policy, one compassionate action at a time, and I knew that wherever my path led next, I would walk it with the steady conviction of someone who had fought for her future and emerged both stronger and more connected than ever. I'm Ariana Wells, 30 years old, and I never saw my life twisting into this knot. I once believed family was a safe harbor. Instead, I watched my mother steer my fiancé toward my older sister. Years later, at my own milestone party, I saw their jaws drop the moment they met my husband. But let me start at the beginning. I grew up in a brick bungalow outside Atlanta, shuttered windows, proud azaleas, a freshly painted porch. On the surface, we looked ordinary. Inside, my mother, Monica, ran the house with a velvet-gloved iron fist. She greeted neighbors with syrupy smiles and then critiqued them over martinis the second they left. My father, Gregory, was quieter. He'd smile at Monica's jabs, but never challenge her. His peacekeeping made him gentle, too gentle, to stop the way she favored my sister Elise. Elise was 4 years older than me. At 34, she had my mother's golden hair, her smile, and her taste for limelight. She won beauty contests in high school, then landed magazine shoots. Every minor triumph drew Monica's thunderous applause. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I buried myself in design portfolios, taught myself 3 coding languages by 16, and spent summers sketching user interfaces in my treehouse. None of it impressed my mother. "Design is a hobby, Ariana," she'd say. "Won't put food on your table." Meanwhile, she'd gush to friends about Elise's latest modeling gig. My father tried to cushion each slight with a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Your mom means well," he'd whisper. But the look in his eyes said he knew how wrong it was. High school was a battlefield of backhanded compliments. When I landed first place in a statewide art competition, Monica cooed, "That's nice, dear," and immediately asked Elise about her next photo shoot. She'd post on Facebook proud of my gorgeous golden girl, complete with 1,000 heart emojis. I learned early that my achievements were footnotes in our family story. So I stopped bragging. I packed my scholarships and acceptance letters, quietly applying only to schools at least 3 states away. When MIT called, I felt relief, not just excitement. At college in Boston, everything changed. For the first time, people valued my ideas. I made a best friend, Maya Patel, over a shared love of late-night coding sessions. "You deserve applause," she insisted one evening when I confessed how I dreaded spring break. "Your life sounds like a reality show no one invited me to watch." I laughed, then wondered if I'd been too numb to notice the dysfunction at home. Over the years, I visited for holidays, less and less. When I did, it felt like stepping into a play I no longer understood. My style, my dreams. Even my laughter struck my mother as odd. I'd catch Elise's smirk from across the table, as Monica seized every chance to remind me I was cold or too intense. That changed the first time I pushed back. During winter break of senior year, Monica frowned at my jeans and sweater combo and said, "You might try looking more presentable." I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I'm comfortable like this, Mom." The silence that followed was delicious. She stormed out of the room. For the first time, I felt like a woman who could set her own terms. And then I met Ryan Carter. He was 28, 2 years younger, presenting at an MIT Tech Expo. His startup used augmented reality to make museum tours interactive. He spoke with an easy confidence, technical, without the usual arrogance. When he asked for feedback on the app's menu design, I offered a few suggestions. He didn't just nod politely. He fired up his laptop-coded changes on the spot and asked for more ideas. We ended up in a coffee shop until closing, swapping stories about code comics and childhood dreams. His dark eyes lit up when he laughed. I was smitten. Soon we were meeting for weekly design critiques that drifted into dinners. He soaked up every idea I had. He valued my input. And I, for the first time, felt truly seen. Spring of senior year, I invited him home. Part of me wanted to flaunt my amazing boyfriend. Part of me hoped Monica would finally see my worth. The visit began well. Dad grilled Ryan on his business plan and asked thoughtful questions. Monica served her finest pot roast. Even Elise seemed courteous, exchanging polite greetings. Then Elise arrived fashionably late, clutching a toddler pink purse that matched her heels. She beelined for Ryan, draping her arm around his shoulder in a showy hug. "So you're the genius who's stolen our little Ariana's attention." She laughed, her voice honey that stung. She leaned in close. I noticed Ryan stiffen, but recover quickly. He introduced Elise to her father as Ryan and me, as Ariana, his fiancée. My chest tightened. Throughout dinner, Elise punctuated every topic with her own anecdotes and shared interests. Hiking, though she'd gone only once for a shoot. Sushi, though she turned her nose up at raw fish. Indie films, though she'd never stay awake past the opening credits. When she claimed she and Ryan both loved urban sketching, he glanced at me with a faint smile before adding, "She's actually one of my favorite collaborators." She completely nails the wireframes I struggle with. My mother cleared her throat. "Elise did consider marketing, didn't you?" She purred, eyes fixed on Ryan. "Before you switched majors," Elise blurted. "Yes, I nearly majored in marketing, but I changed when I realized." Her words tumbled into a half-truth about her grades. I stayed silent, watching Ryan's polite nods. The weekend ended on cordial notes. Ryan told me afterward, "Your family is something." I'm impressed how you handled everything. I forced a laugh. Dallas Cowboys fans would seem tame compared to those two. He grinned. Your dad's great. Your mom? Well, she's an experience. That night, as we drove back to Boston, Ryan squeezed my hand. I've been thinking, he said softly. After graduation, would you consider joining my team? You're exactly the partner I need. My heart thudded. I imagined our future designing together, building something real. At that moment, the pain of my childhood seemed miles away, but I didn't know then how quickly that dream would shatter. The warning signs were there, in the quick glances, the forced smiles, the way Mom's praise for Elise always felt like an auction. I believed in us. I believed in me. I was about to learn how fragile both can be. I thought everything was perfect until the morning texts stopped arriving. Ryan once pinged me at dawn with a goofy gif. Now days would pass before I heard from him. Our nightly video calls became infrequent. Our shared playlist went untouched. I blamed final stress and investor meetings. He said his startup was on the brink of something big, but my gut tightened each time I saw his name flash on my phone without a message attached. One Saturday afternoon, I scrolled through my feed and froze at a photo, a quaint cafe on the outskirts of Atlanta, framed by oak trees in bloom. In the corner of the shot, I recognized Ryan's laptop bag. He'd told me he was in Seattle raising funds. Atlanta was opposite that. I confronted him that evening. His laughter sounded brittle when he spun a story about a detour to meet a potential investor's friend. He claimed he didn't want to worry me during midterms. I wanted to believe him, so I did. But I couldn't shake the unease, so during spring break, I surprised him with a visit home. I arrived unannounced at his loft in Boston, suitcase in hand, heart racing with excitement. No car in the driveway. His studio was dark and empty, the notes I left on his desk unanswered. Every corner felt hollow. Hoping for answers, I drove to his company's warehouse 3 hours away. No car there either, just his partner Evan locking up for the day. When I asked where Ryan was, Evan looked puzzled. He took some personal time, he said. Something about family. He offered a polite but confused sympathy before slipping inside. My heart pounded as I drove home in a daze. When I pulled up to my parents' house at 10 that night, Dad's Yukon and Mom's Prado were in the driveway. I parked behind them and crept to the front door, every step echoing in the stillness. I heard low voices through the living room window. I pressed my ear to the pane and recognized Ryan's voice, soft and tentative, and then Elise's laughter, bright and invasive. I peered inside. Ryan sat on the couch leaning toward Elise, her hand resting on his knee. Monica, seated in her favorite wingback, leaned forward with a conspiratorial grin. You two understand each other in ways Ariana never could, she was saying. She's brilliant, but she lives in a world of code. Elise knows how to connect, network, and host the right events. You need someone who can navigate the spotlight. My chest ached. Stop, Ryan murmured, pulling back slightly. Elise pouted. I'm just trying to help you both. I flung the door open. Silence swallowed the room. Ryan's eyes widened. Elise's hand flew from his knee. Monica's mask cracked. Ariana, Ryan stammered. I can explain. I ignored the word. How long? His gaze dropped. A few months, he confessed. I felt my heart fracture. Did you ever plan to tell me? He looked ashamed. I didn't know how. My mother rose with false concern. We only discussed your future, she sputtered. Isn't it normal for a mother to guide her daughter? I laughed, a hollow, painful sound. You manipulated him behind my back. You set me up to fail so Elise could succeed. Don't be dramatic, Monica snapped. I was practical. Elise needed security more than you did. Words blurred as I grabbed my keys and ran. I heard Dad's soft apology drift from the hallway. I had no time to hear it. I got in my car and drove until tears blurred my vision. I ended up on Maya's couch in Boston. When she answered at 2 a.m., I collapsed in her arms, sobbing. It's worse than I thought, I admitted between tears. He betrayed me and so did my family. Maya held me tight. I'm here. You don't have to survive this alone. The next weeks passed in a haze. I couldn't code, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I withdrew from my capstone, withdrew from life. Maya begged me to see a therapist. I resisted until I realized staying numb was worse than feeling pain. I found Dr. Chen, whose quiet strength and gentle questions began to unravel the tangle of guilt, anger, and heartbreak. "Your family's betrayal runs deep," she told me at our first session, "but you get to choose what comes next." Weeks of therapy helped me breathe again. I discovered that grief has its own timeline, not mine. I learned that running away a temporary fix can lead to real growth when you face what hurts. I set boundaries with my family: no calls, no visits, no social media. It was painful but necessary. By summer, I withdrew from MIT and transferred my credits to Georgia Tech, closer to home, but far enough to protect my progress. I surprised myself with relief. I started rebuilding a part-time internship at a design firm, Yoga, to calm my mind, weekend hikes with Maya, to remind me the world still held beauty. One afternoon, cleaning out old notebooks, I found my first sketch of Ryan's app interface doodles scrawled with hope. I paused. The future I dreamed with him was over, but I still loved design. I had the talent, the fire, and the resiliency to rebuild my dreams on my own terms. I closed the notebook with a sense of calm. Betrayal had shattered my illusions, but it couldn't crush my truths. I was worthy of trust, worthy of love, and worthy of my own success. I arrived at Georgia Tech with a mix of apprehension and determination. The sprawling campus felt familiar enough, but my heart carried old scars. I immersed myself in UX design classes, each lecture revealing new truths about how people think and interact. My first assignment was rebuilding the student portal. I sketched wireframes late into the night and tested prototypes on classmates. When Dr. Rosen, my professor, spoke of my work as elegant and user-centric, I felt a spark of the girl I used to be. At my part-time internship, I joined Nova & Comey, a boutique studio led by Douglas Hart, a mentor whose belief in my skill patched cracks in my confidence. He handed me a freelance project redesigning the website of a local art collective. Meeting the artists reminded me how creation can heal. They spoke of community collaboration and hope. Their passion reignited my own. Douglas encouraged me to organize a workshop. Tentatively, I booked a small room in the student union and invited students to learn basic UI principles. 15 people showed up, more than I expected. They asked questions. They sketched with enthusiasm. They told me later how the workshop helped them on other assignments. I realized teaching could be as rewarding as designing. Meanwhile, I found solace in a campus group called Women in Tech. Every Thursday evening, we gathered in a converted lab with bright posters and leftover pizza. Lila, a senior in computer engineering, led our discussions on career paths and imposter syndrome. She shared her own journey, from a shy freshman to a confident project lead at a major firm. Her honesty resonated in my chest. I volunteered to co-host a hackathon. We called it Ignite. It was a small event, 24 hours, a handful of teams. Yet watching strangers become collaborators reminded me that trust and creativity can flourish in moments of shared purpose. My team built a prototype app to help students find quiet study spots. When judges awarded us second place, my heart swelled with pride in something untainted by family drama. Friendships deepened too. I met Marcus, an industrial design major, who favored hand sketches over screen mock-ups, and Zoe, a marketing student with a wicked sense of humor. We joined forces for late-night study sessions and impromptu museum trips on weekends. Marcus introduced me to his father's woodshop, where I learned to shape metal and wood not for code, but for tangible creation. Zoe dragged me to poetry slams, where I realized language could flow like code with rhythm and precision. I also discovered mindfulness through Sarah's yoga classes. Her voice guided me through breathwork that quelled the noise in my mind. Each exhale carried away doubt. Each inhale reminded me I was alive, whole, and capable of new beginnings. By midsummer, my freelance work had grown into a small client list. I launched Arcadia Designs, a brand that felt like mine, a name inspired by simple beauty and community. I built a website, created a logo, and sent cold emails to local startups. Some didn't reply. A few offered small contracts. My first paid job under my own name came from a health consultancy needing a dashboard redesign. When they praised the clarity and warmth of my layouts, I realized that I was building more than interfaces. I was rebuilding my own narrative. One evening, I sat on the roof of my apartment building, Atlanta's skyline glowing around me. I pulled out my old sketchbook. The pages where I'd once drawn Ryan's app designs now felt like relics. I traced a finger over a drawing and felt no bitterness, only gratitude for the lessons that pain had taught me. I closed the sketchbook, rolled my shoulders back, and let a smile form. I had found my rhythm again. I had reclaimed my voice. The horizon stretched before me, full of possibility and light. N. A week after I tapped yes on that LinkedIn invite, I stood backstage at the Emerging Women in Tech conference, lights humming overhead, and my heart shaking like a leaf. Yet the same voice in my head that once stuttered through every presentation now steadied me with each measured breath. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage and saw hundreds of faces waiting for my story. I began with shattered trust and betrayal, then traced my path through grief to reclamation and purpose, and I watched as heads nodded, eyes glistened, and pens raced in notebooks. The standing ovation felt surreal, but I welcomed it as proof that pain can be sculpted into power. Backstage, I let myself smile for the first time in months until my phone buzzed with an unknown number. It was my mother. "Your father collapsed last night. He's stable but in surgery. We need you home." My chest clenched. Atlanta felt both worlds away and all too close. I swallowed hard, called Maya to cover my evening debrief, and booked the earliest flight south. On the plane, I stared at the city lights dwindling beneath me, memories of home rushing back porch swings. Dad's soft chuckle when I exploded a broken widget. Mom's gentle scolding that always felt too sharp. At Hartsfield, the humid air hit me like a wave. My rental car's GPS blinked 17 miles to home. My hands shook on the wheel. I tried to steady my breathing, remembering Sarah's yoga cues: inhale compassion, exhale fear. But the road to my parents' house felt impossible. At the front door, I paused the old welcome mat, worn but familiar, under my sneakers. I knocked and entered quietly. Dad's bed sat by the window, sunlight pooling on pale blankets. He looked smaller, frailer. His eyes flickered with relief when he saw me. "Ari," he whispered. I knelt beside him, took his hand, felt both home and heartbreak. Mom hovered at the door, her posture stiff, her eyes unreadable. Elise stood behind her, cheeks flushed, arms crossed like a shield. An electric tension crackled in the air, the old currents of favoritism and betrayal pulsing between us. I could keep walking away, could turn toward Dad and shut them out, but I remembered Dr. Chen's words. You choose what role they play. So I rose, offered a steady nod to each of them, and let the past and present collide in the same room. Shadows of every wrong decision hovered in that silent space, but my feet stayed planted on the faded rug. I drew in a slow breath and prepared to speak first to Dad, then to Mom, then to Elise, with all the strength I'd rebuilt. I knelt beside his bed, his frail hand resting in mine, the steady beep of the monitor marking each precious breath. The sunlight slanted through the blinds, painting pale stripes across the hospital sheets. I felt the weight of years in my chest, years of unspoken anger, buried grief, and silent longing. When he opened his eyes and offered a weak smile, I realized how much I had missed being simply his daughter. I turned and saw Mom lingering in the doorway. Her posture, stiff lips pressed in a line I remembered from a lifetime of criticism. Elise hovered behind her, arms crossed, eyes downcast. For a heartbeat, I thought of retreating to the safety I had built in Boston, the workshops, the hackathons, the friends who kept me from sinking. But then I heard my own voice, calm and clear. I came because he's my father and I love him. I want him to know that nothing will take that away. Mom's lips trembled. Elise blinked upward as if surprised to find me still standing. I squeezed Dad's hand and spoke to Mom. I need to understand why you did it, why you convinced him that my future didn't matter. She swallowed hard. I was afraid you'd never marry, never have stability. I thought I was protecting you. Her confession landed like a stone. By betraying my trust and his, I said softly, you taught me that safety comes not from love, but from manipulation. Elise stepped forward, voice shaking. I never wanted to hurt you, Ari. Mom pressured me. I was scared she'd hate me if I said no. I saw tears bloom in her eyes. tears of regret, of shame I once felt myself. You could have spoken up. You and I could have faced her together. She nodded, words caught in her throat. I inhaled deeply, gathering the strength I had cultivated over months of therapy and late-night coding sessions. I'm not here to punish you, I said to Elise. I'm here to decide how you will exist in my life going forward. Mom's gaze flickered between us. I turned back to Dad. I want to be with you while you heal, Dad, but I can't pretend the past didn't happen. He squeezed my hand, tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you. I wiped my own eyes, feeling the tension in my chest loosen. Thank you for saying that. I looked at Mom. I forgive you in part. I forgive the possibility of reconciliation, not the betrayal. You'll have to earn my trust again. She nodded, her shoulders sagging, as if relief and regret mingled in that small movement. Then I faced Elise. I don't know what our sisterhood looks like now, but I want the chance to find out. She offered a shaky smile, one sibling to another. In that moment, the hospital room felt expansive, as if walls and past grievances had dissolved. Later, while Dad rested, Mom and Elise hovered uncertainly. I invited them to sit. The three of us mother-sisters talked quietly about Dad's surgery, the small comforts he would need, and the weight of choices made in fear. I guided the conversation toward healing, setting boundaries, checking in honestly, and seeking family counseling should they choose. Mom's defenses faded under the light of our shared concern. Elise vowed to find her own path independent of Mom's shadow. As I left that evening to return to my apartment in Atlanta, I felt both sadness for the brokenness and hope for what remained. I kissed Dad's forehead, promising to be back soon, and Mom and Elise joined me at the door. We stood in silence, three women connected by blood and mistakes. I whispered, "It's a start." Next morning, I rose before dawn and drove back to Boston, the eastern sky soft with sunrise. On the highway, I reflected on how confronting old wounds had peeled away layers of pain, leaving raw truth behind. I realized that forgiveness isn't a destination, but a process, one that begins with acknowledging hurt and choosing whether to let it define you. As I merged onto I-85, I felt a new resolve. My life was mine to shape. My family was no longer a prison, but a garden, where with careful tending, even fractured roots could sustain blossoms of understanding. I laid my suitcase by the entryway and poured a cup of coffee, letting the steam carry away the traces of hospital antiseptic, the tight ache of betrayal, and the fragile hope that had taken root in Atlanta. I opened my laptop and dove into Arcadia Designs, reviewing client feedback and drafting proposals for a new mobile interface that blended empathy and efficiency. My calendar filled with meetings, a brainstorming session with Marcus to explore tactile prototyping in virtual environments, a strategy call with Zoe to refine our marketing pitch for the upcoming Women in Tech panel, and a design review with Douglas Hart, whose thoughtful critiques continued to sharpen my vision. Between deadlines, I carved out time to reconnect with Dr. Chen, my therapist, and she reminded me that healing isn't an achievement, but a daily choice. I nodded as I walked to campus for our next workshop, feeling the weight of my story transformed into something yet malleable, neither burden nor blueprint, but material for the life I was building. When I co-hosted our second Ignite Hackathon, I watched with pride as participants formed teams around diverse ideas, an app to help non-English speakers navigate public transportation, a platform for trauma survivors to find peer support, and a sustainability tracker for small businesses. Their enthusiasm reminded me that design, like reconciliation, thrives when we listen first and then build together. Amid this momentum, I realized a final reckoning with my family could no longer be postponed. I drafted an invitation to a community showcase where Arcadia Designs would present our most meaningful projects: the health consultancy dashboard, the art collective website, and the student portal redesign. I extended special invites to Mom and Elise, my heart pounding as I clicked send. When they replied with cautious acceptance, I felt both fear and relief spool through my veins. In the weeks leading up to the showcase, I curated each exhibit. Like a path home, I placed the health dashboard front and center with a short narrative about empathy and design. I lined the art collective site beside images of the children whose voices had reignited my own. And I screened a demo of the portal beside my earliest sketches, remnants of the girl who had once fled her own house to build shelter out of code. On the evening of the event, the gallery lights glowed warm against the brick walls, and colleagues gathered around plush benches to celebrate our collective work. I welcomed visitors with steady calm, introducing each project not as finished masterpieces, but as living invitations to collaboration. As the crowd thickened, I heard the soft click of the front door and turned to see Mom and Elise standing together, looking smaller in their carefully chosen dresses than I remembered. Mom's eyes drifted across the displays, lingering on the narrative panels that spoke of my journey through grief to growth. Elise studied the projection of the student portal, her forehead creased in concentration. I approached with Marcus at my side, Zoe offering her bright grin behind me, and Douglas standing by the health dashboard, arms crossed in quiet pride. I slipped an arm through Mom's and glanced at Elise. "Thank you for coming," I said softly, my voice carrying the calm of months spent building rather than escaping. Mom nodded, and her eyes glistened with an unfamiliar shimmer of humility. She ran a fingertip along the edge of the art collective poster, reading aloud the line, "Design is the bridge between hearts." "You believe this," she said, almost to herself. I smiled. "I do." Elise stepped forward, voice hushed. "Ari, I'm sorry I let Mom pressure me. I didn't speak up when it mattered. I felt the old ache in the pit of my stomach, but I also felt a foundation beneath my feet that no betrayal could shake." "I know," I replied. "Thank you for saying it." We stood together, three women shaped by the same story, but no longer bound to the same tragedy. The evening unfolded with warmth. Mom asked Marcus about prototyping. Elise quizzed Zoe on marketing strategies, and I realized they weren't simply guests, but participants in the community I had chosen. Later, I took the stage for a closing talk. Lights dimmed, projector humming behind me, and I spoke of the power of design to heal divides between user and product, between sister and sister, between past and present. I shared how betrayal had taught me that safety built on manipulation collapses, while trust woven through honesty endures. When I finished, the applause rose like rolling thunder. And through the haze of gratitude, I spotted Mom and Elise rising to their feet, their faces softened by pride. I breathed deeply, letting the moment anchor itself in my memory. When the gallery emptied, I gathered my belongings and found them waiting outside under the glow of the marquee. Mom reached for my hand first, voice steady. "You've created something beautiful from our brokenness," she said. Elise nodded behind her tears in her eyes. Can we keep building together?" I held their gaze sober with the lessons of the past and hopeful for the days ahead. "Yes," I said, and meant it. With that single word, the last walls between us shifted. I walked them to their car, the cool night air humming with possibility, and returned to the gallery to turn off the lights. Alone among the empty benches and dark screens, I felt the gentle pulse of a life reclaimed, not defined by betrayal or by anyone else's design, but by the choices I'd made to heal, to create, and to love on my own terms. As I stepped outside, the stars wheeled overhead, and I whispered gratitude to the universe and to the girl who had dared to sketch her refuge in code. This was my reckoning and my beginning.